Well, hello there and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining me today and for taking the time to really get to know the facts on care home funding. Whether you are a carer or you know someone who is in care, it's our mission to help you understand the process of funding care home costs. Today I'll be addressing your general questions around care home fees, which you've submitted to me by email or via my Twitter page at Care Home Experts. You still have the opportunity to ask your questions over the next hour, and I will try my best to answer them all. We will be hosting a live discussion forum over the next couple of weeks, whereby you will have the chance to air your views, put questions to us, and we will do our best to address those questions. There are 3 easy steps which will allow you to view these broadcasts live and decide and help you decide on the type of questions you want to put to us. All you have to do is, ahead of the live broadcast, submit your queries on any of the above topics on our Twitter page at Care Home Experts or via email direct to myself. Or you can go to our website and register your interest in the event. You will then receive an email confirmation with further details of the event, and all you need to do is simply click on the link, add your email on the date and time specified, and begin watching the broadcast in action. Another way is to ask questions throughout the live broadcast in the designated chat area or on our Twitter page at Care Home Experts. Don't worry if you can't make it to our live broadcast. You can always enjoy our podcast video of the discussion directly streamed from our website, which is www.simpsonmillar.co.uk. Now, before we begin, I'd like to give you a brief introduction about myself. I'm a solicitor and I'm a partner, and I've been with Simpson Millar for 13 years now. Outside of work, I'm also a carer. I care for my father, who's 95 years old. So I'd like to think that I have first-hand experience of the challenges a carer and the patient who's being cared for faces on a day-to-day basis. Now, you will have heard about the recent scheme about When You Die scheme, which will be introduced in 2015. The idea is that councils will lend the money to nursing home residents and recover it after death from the estate. It might help, I think, in the interim so that the patient doesn't have to worry about finding the funds, but I don't think it's any consolation to the families who will still have to provide the funds after their loved one has passed away. We are currently acting for a large number of clients who've had to sell their homes to fund the cost of their care. Now, these are people who have worked very hard throughout their lives, and it is sometimes very tragic that they're having to take such a draconian action to sell their homes when they may well be entitled to have the cost of their care paid for in full by the NHS. The problem that we also come across is that most people are going to be self-funding. They're not told about the options available to them. Consequently, they have to struggle and find the funds to fund the cost of care. Some people do get some funding from their local authority, but this is obviously subject to a means test. Now, if they have a genuine primary health care need, they may be eligible for full funding from the NHS, which is not subject to a means test. Now, moving on to the questions we've had, the first question we've received is, who is eligible? And what is the difference between the 2 types of funding? Anyone who has an ongoing healthcare need, be it for physical health or mental health reasons, could be eligible to have their fees paid for in full by the NHS. There are 4 key indicators that are taken into account when eligibility is assessed, and these are the nature of the medical condition, the type of treatment required, including the quantity and quality of care required. The second indicator is the complexity of the symptoms that interact, making it difficult for people caring for the patient to manage or control their health needs. Another indicator is the intensity of care required. One or more needs that are so severe that they require regular intervention from a qualified practitioner, such as a nurse. And the fourth indicator is the unpredictability or unexpected changes in the medical condition that are difficult to manage and may present a risk to the patient as well as to people who are caring for them. So these are the four indicators that are taken into account when assessing whether or not somebody might be eligible for continuing healthcare funding. Now, the NHS actually provide two types of funding. One is the nursing funding, which is a weekly payment of about £100. This is generally provided to patients who require a nurse to attend on them. So, for example, if a patient suffers from diabetes and they need a nurse to administer the insulin, then they may be eligible for nursing funding. The other award, which is not quite well known, is full NHS funding. And this is where, if the patient is able to demonstrate that they have a primary healthcare need, and it is accepted by the primary care trust that they do have a healthcare need, then they receive the full cost of their care, which is not subject to a means test. It is free, just like the NHS services. Now, moving on to the next question, we've been asked, who do we act for? What type of clients do we represent? Well, in a nutshell, it's the person who needs the care, but more often than not, we get instructed by a member of the family or a friend or an appointee who is instructed to act on behalf of the patient, such as a power of attorney or a deputy or a son or a daughter. The service, incidentally, is not limited to elderly clients and their carers or representatives. Anybody over the age of 18 who has and is able to demonstrate that they have a primary healthcare need is eligible. We can also represent clients who fall into that category. We also act for personal representatives of the deceased person's estate. So we also have a lot of cases where the patient has passed away and we've been instructed by the representative of the estate to recover the fees paid by the patient, which they were wrongly denied when they were receiving the treatment. Now, you may have heard there's been a lot about this in the news about the deadlines. The Department of Health in March this year announced the closing off of retrospective unassessed care home fees. And these deadlines are very strict in that only very exceptional circumstances will justify a claim being made outside the deadline. Now, the first period to be aware of is anybody who's got a care home fee claim from April 04 to the 30th of September 2007 and 1st of October 07 to 31st March 11 has a deadline by when they should register their request for a retrospective assessment, and the deadline is the 30th of September 2012. So essentially, for care home fees provided from April 04 to 31st March 2011, the time is running out. You really have until the 30th of September. It's your last chance to lodge your request with the relevant primary care trust and ask for a retrospective assessment. There is another deadline which covers care home fees from 1st April 2011 to 31st March 2012, and the deadline for that is the 31st March 2013. I should mention at this stage that care home fees is not only limited to the cost of care provided in a care home setting, a nursing home, or even in an elderly mentally infirm unit. It could also cover the cost of being cared for in the patient's own home. Moving on then. Who decides whether funding should be granted? Well, at the moment, the primary care trust who holds the contract for GP surgeries are the ones that decide whether or not a patient is eligible for NHS funding. So if you are going to make a request, it is possible for you directly to make a request by contacting the primary care trust yourself. but you need to make sure that you've contacted the correct primary care trust. You can, of course, instruct a firm of solicitors like ourselves to help you with that process. The Department of Health wants a new commissioning board to relieve the primary care trust of this responsibility. So from April 2013, there will be a new body responsible for assessing continuing healthcare funding, and that new body will be called the Clinical Commissioning Groups, as opposed to what we have at present, which is a primary care trust. The next question we've received is, how is eligibility determined? Well, an assessment obviously needs to take place. It can be done either by a member of the NHS or a social worker, a carer, a care manager, or the GP. There are a number of tools they use to screen and decide whether eligibility should be considered. More often than not, a checklist is used. It's a screening process, essentially, to look at the patient's healthcare needs and determine whether funding should be considered. A more detailed process could be used by using the decision support tool, which is a 16-page long document whereby the patient's mobility, cognition, skin condition, their cognitive, their behaviour, and other day-to-day health issues are taken on board, and a grading is made on whether the healthcare comes into the low, moderate or severe domain before a decision is made on whether or not they're eligible for full funding. And of course, if somebody's health is rapidly declining and they are in need of a great deal more health professional input, then it might be appropriate to carry out an assessment using the fast track tool, where everything is done very, very quickly. And if a decision is also reached on whether or not funding should be granted very quickly as well, that's obviously because of the nature of the patient's health. It could be a situation where somebody's terminally ill and their condition is rapidly declining. The next question we've had is, take me through the instances when an assessment must take place. Now, generally speaking, NHS funding should really be considered when a person is being discharged from the hospital and a decision is made that they are not able to go back home to look after themselves, but they need to be in a care home environment. A request can also be made on behalf of someone living in a nursing home. So the care manager can take a view that this person needs to be assessed to see if they're eligible for full funding, and it can be down to the care home manager to arrange this. It can also be triggered when someone's needs or situation changes. So we spoke earlier on about the fast track tool. If somebody's health condition is rapidly declining and their condition is terminal, then at that point, an assessment should be triggered. And another time when assessment should be triggered is when their health needs come under review. Now, generally speaking, if someone has been assessed once to see if they're eligible for NHS funding, and at that point it's been decided that they're not eligible, they are, so to speak, in the system, so frequent reviews should take place as a matter of course. But of course, sometimes this may not happen, in which case a family member can trigger a review by contacting the primary care trust or even speaking to the GP and asking for an assessment to be carried out if they think it's necessary. One of the questions that we've been asked is, why are we providing this service? Well, our subsidiary MG Law have been servicing these clients for some 2.5 to 3 years now, and we have found a really strange anomaly in that a large proportion of people who end up going into a care home are funding the cost of their care themselves, when some of them genuinely may be eligible for full NHS funding. So as you can appreciate, this is very, very unfair, and it could well be because the patient or the family were totally unaware that this funding facility was available. people who are lucky enough to get a contribution from the local authority are going to be the ones who can satisfy the means test. But with regards to funding from the NHS, if somebody is able to show that they have a primary health care need, then all their fees are met in full. And given the fact that the average care home fee can range from £400 to £750, and if somebody's got a condition like dementia or Alzheimer's, their care home fees could be around £1,400 a week, you are really looking at large sums of money. Annually, it could be around £32,000 a year. So if a person survives and stays in a care home for 4 or 5 years, it could easily go over £100,000, which means that most people end up having to sell their homes to fund the cost of their care. Very, very unfair, we believe, and if we are able to help people claim back the fees they should have been paid in the first place, then we think that we've done a good job by our clients. It's not uncommon for people to find that they've totally run out of funds and they're really worried. They don't know how they're going to continue to fund the cost of their care. And let's face it, most people go in a care home in a crisis situation where they've had a fall at home, they're unable to look after themselves, or perhaps they've just been diagnosed with dementia, they're a risk to their own, to themselves, and they're a risk to other people as well, and a decision is made within a short space of time to put them in a care home. At that point, a lot of people find that they don't have the information to hand to make an informed decision about funding, and they are left with no choice but to fund the cost of their care themselves. And it may not appear to be a problem at the early stages, but as time goes on and the patient's care needs are managed, the question arises as to how they're going to carry on funding the cost of care. So this is the reason why we feel that where people have been wrongly denied funding, we would want to and are able to help them recover the funds from the NHS on their behalf. Last but not least, before we end this session, if anybody has any feedback on our broadcast, good or bad, please do let us have your feedback, because if nothing else, it will help us improve on our next session. And if you have any questions that you think we should have addressed in this session and you would like us to address, you're more than welcome to email those questions to us, and we will endeavour to address them in our future broadcast. Thank you very much again for taking the time to listen to us and to be with us today, and we hope that the information that you've received today has been of some use to you.